Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. On today's episode, we are talking about toilets, but not just any old bog standard toilet, toilets that don't use any water and that generate energy. Sounds incredible, right? Virginia Gardiner is the founder, CEO, and inventor of Loowatt, the waterless toilet. And Virginia started the business as her degree project in industrial design to address the fact that 40% of the world doesn't have a toilet, and the rest of us are using solutions that aren't sustainable. Virginia started the business in 2010, and since then they have served over 250,000 people, captured over 750 tons of waste, and generated over 56 megawatts of renewable energy. Now, Virginia has raised a total of 4.5 million in equity funding, plus around 3 million in grant funding to enable her to build and scale the business from the UK, starting to go into other countries across the globe now. And her mission is to create local jobs, improve the environment and health for everyone. So welcome, Virginia. I'm really, really excited to talk through your journey today. It's not often I get to talk to someone who makes toilets for a living. But you didn't start your career out in design and innovation, did you? You were a writer. So tell us about that. And
yes.
what made you want to kind of move across from writing into being an entrepreneur?
Well, I'd love to talk about that. Thank you for having me, by the way. This should be a lot of fun. Yeah, so what happened? I started out, I studied both engineering and the humanities as an undergraduate. I was always mentally straddling sort of making things and writing and reading and language. And I didn't really make a choice in college. I actually majored in literature, and I did a lot of minor coursework in engineering, and then went and started writing for a new publication that was also a startup that was writing about the built environment. So in a way, it was a good job after college because it was kind of marrying my fascination with the built environment and architecture and design with writing and social commentary. And so that did, in a funny way, lead me straight to where I am now, because I was quite, it was when I was in my early 20s, it was around the time of the start of the Iraq War, and September 11th, and that sort of stuff was happening in the US. And I was a bit, like a lot of people in their early 20s, I was a bit tormented about some of the things happening in the world. And I found that in researching the built environment, there was a fascination there for me, especially with how we interact with kitchens and bathrooms. And I ended up writing an article about toilets. It was one of the first articles that I actually penned because I was a junior editor when I started it. So a lot of my job was researching and things like that. But I got an assignment to write an article about toilets, and my boss loved it. It was kind of funny, but also kind of biting in terms of looking at, well, why is this thing that why haven't we changed this part of our daily lives where we're flushing gallons and gallons of water down the toilet? And so that overlap, when I then got tired after sort of 5 or 6 years, I got a bit bored writing. I did like it. And I think I learned a lot from it that's helped me in my career now. But I wanted to do something that was more hands-on and impactful. So that's when I decided to go to graduate school. And then when it came time to do my own degree project, it was an opportunity to go back to the toilet and think, why is this? And try to rethink it, basically.
Yeah, amazing. So tell us more about the Loowatt toilet. What makes it so unique?
Well, the Loowatt toilet is waterless, but it provides an experience on par with a flush toilet. So number one, is that, and this really has to do not only with the environment, but also with social justice and equality. Since the very start, I believed, and my company has believed, that to make a change in this basic part of human life, and bearing in mind that 70% of people don't have access to sewers. So there's a huge global need, but to really make an impactful change, we believe that you need to provide that experience at the front end and bring value to the toilet. And to the and then you also have to have it be fulfilling basically the essential criteria of a 21st century design in terms of the planet. So, it needs to be waterless because water scarcity is increasing very rapidly. And it needs to harvest value from waste because there's plenty of existing technologies that do that. And if we're not doing that, then we're just wasting waste. And so you can get nutrients, you can get energy. There's tons of different ways to do it. My business believes that the way to scale that is really that the utility providers, and that will be happening at a citywide scale. So what our technology does is it facilitates that waste to value by making the toilet something which captures and contains the waste, is really easy to service. And then we've produced machinery that makes it so that the feedstock, what we call feedstock from the waste, is all harvested, and everything that goes into the toilet is managed in closed loop systems. So that's what we've developed.
Wow, incredible. And I can't imagine how you get that kind of business off the ground, because huge amounts of R&D, lots of testing, iterations. I imagine quite a lot of capex to invest in hardware or manufacturing. And tell us more about the early stages of making it happen.
Yeah, there is a raft of challenges, and we have not picked easy, and I became an entrepreneur because of the idea. I wasn't an entrepreneur who then found an idea. Once you've become an entrepreneur and you've built a business, I think that then you start to think differently, and then you can start thinking about how you would cross apply those skills if you were to do it again, or it gives you a whole different perspective on everything. But yeah, I came into this just with the belief in the idea, and we did spend a lot of time refining the technology, and also really a lot of time refining and also pivoting in terms of how we have the right route to market, because there is a raft of challenges. We're developing not only a product but a system. It's a system with a service model. There's two target markets, and we absolutely believe this is the right approach to having the impact that we want, but we've needed to have target markets in portable sanitation as well as urban sanitation, the former being essential to de-risking the longer time frame and sales cycle of the latter, because transforming how cities in emerging markets are delivering to the urban poor is a long game. And we've made some really exciting inroads in that in the last, mostly in the last 3 or 4 years is really when things have started to move in that. And then portables, again, it's a bit quicker of a fit because there's already an incumbent, set of businesses and market where there's service companies servicing chemical and vacuum toilets. So we can fit into that, but it's still, changing. It's a disruptive innovation. So yeah, there's and we've had to fund a lot of development of product and development of business models. And so yeah, we've been supported by quite a lot of grants in addition to equity, and grants really came in early on. And I think it was because of the impact and the potential. Our projects and our work really fit into grants. But one of the problems with grants is that they tend to be project money. I mean, they can be various degrees of unrestricted. And we've, I think in fairness, been actually very strategic in how we've deployed grant funds. So it hasn't taken us off into crazy directions, but it's something that I wasn't as aware of at the beginning as I became aware of later on, how important that is, that when you use grants to build your business, you make sure that you're really deploying that in critical pathways. And there are some examples of times when I can think of projects where we built things with grant money that turned out to really be R&D and didn't lead to direct commercial results. And that's what's supposed to happen sometimes with R&D, but it's important to be aware of that if you're funding your business with grants.
Yeah, it's not just a question of looking at to see what grants are available and thinking about how you can squish your business into it. It's got to work for you, right?
Yes, and that's a very important thought process.
Mm-hmm. So was grant funding the main source of funding then at the start while you were developing the concept and the routes to market?
It was, yeah. So we quite you could almost we were lucky to be placed in an incubator that was set up by Innovation. Well, it was set up by the Royal College of Art and Imperial College initially, and then it evolved into the Innovation RCA incubator, which is an incubator for businesses coming out of the Royal College of Art and Imperial, developing exciting new technologies. So there's quite a bit of hardware in that group, and quite a bit of really visionary ideas. So it was a good place for us to be, and they did make an initial investment into the company, which we were able to match at the same time, quite randomly, because there was a video that had been published online about my degree project, and a high net worth individual who happened to live in Madagascar caught his eye, and he wanted to invest. So he invested at the same time as the Royal College of Art. But in hindsight, when I think back to that time, one of the things that was interesting is that I had 3 co-founders who actually exited the business a few years later, and which was a somewhat painful process. And this is great evidence of me not knowing that I was going to be an entrepreneur, because I had brought these MBAs, all 3 men. There were 2 MBAs and then another guy who I sort of brought into the business, and they all had, much more sort of commercial backgrounds, but they didn't have time. They didn't have the ability to really commit what was required to build a company at all. But I think that when we attracted that initial funding, having men on the founding team, that tipped it. I don't think we would have gotten the money otherwise. I think people looked at it and said, "Oh, look at this, crazy art school graduate who's developed this product. Thank goodness there's some suits next to her who know how to run a business, who have MBAs."
I mean, there is something about, I know investors, they like to see co-founders that can cover off, a number of different critical skills. And but it's interesting what you say. It's hard to know, isn't it? You don't know what it would have been like had you been on your own. But
if I were an investor, and I dream of someday becoming one, because I think I would be quite a savvy angel investor. I've invested into my own business, but anyway, if I were investing in others, I would be I think that co-founders can be quite a big risk as well, because either things go well or they don't.
Yeah, but that's interesting now that they're no longer in the business. And how did that?
Yeah, and that was very early on. I mean, that was after the first 2. We weren't even out of. We were still doing patents and R&D and burning really small amounts of money at the time that they exited, and they just didn't have any time to commit to the company.
That must have been, I mean, did that feel scary for you? Suddenly, yes. This is just you and it's all on your shoulders.
Well, they weren't doing enough work to make it feel like it was more like I just needed to, so yes. That it wasn't like a big change in how we were running the company. I think by the time they left, we had been able to bring some grant funding in. But it was clear that we were going to need to have them off the management team, and also just reduce their equity in the business in order to raise funds and grow the company, because there was they had no participation in it. So it was an obvious thing that needed to be done at the time, and I got support at the time to do it. And at the time it felt so daunting and scary, but when I look back at it now, it was just a tiny little blip.
Yeah. It's just, I think it's very important to sort out those issues with co-founders early on. Really
certainly is
for doing that. So grant funding is getting you out of the blocks, getting the product developed. So how long did it take you before you had a product that was ready to put in market?
Well, that's a great question, because we actually just released the fully production ready Pro toilet in September, and we had earlier stage versions of the product. And then with the home toilet, we actually just released the production ready toilet last year. Now, what we found out over time was sort of the depth of testing required for really producing a scalable manufactured product. So we were doing sort of smaller scale manufacture. One of the big things that happened at Loowatt was that we didn't know exactly how to bring this product to market, right? So And in hindsight, I think this is something that has worked quite well for us. But it did require investment and thinking as we moved. So we set up servicing companies. So we had got the technology to the point where it was totally working. We started processing waste at Thames Water Utility in 2016. At that time, we also had customers in Madagascar paying for services at home. So we really had proof of product market fit starting at that time. And we were starting to generate revenue through services. Quite significant for the stage that we were at. We were able to generate significant revenues from bringing toilets to events in the UK and processing the waste with Thames Water Utility. And then on the emerging markets side, we had a business model that was really starting to take shape in terms of saying that, that there's a scalable opportunity here for serving urban homes. But we were refining the technology in tandem with delivering services with it ourselves. And on the one hand, what that meant was that we ended up with a really good product to use and a really good product to service. It also meant that we needed to then, after that period of running our own services, we had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment after a couple of years and said to ourselves, we're not going to scale up a giant servicing company. We're not going to set up servicing companies in all these emerging market cities where we want to go. We need to be a hardware and technology provider to servicing companies because that's a much more scalable model. And so when we made that decision, then we needed to go back and say, well, what does it really take to make this product manufactured at scale? And then more recently, we brought in a CTO who I had known for some years before, but who, he was at Dyson in the early years and then at Kohler, which is a huge toilet company. And so he really knows fully about that scalable manufacturing. And for Loowatt, we need to think about it not only for the toilets, but for the refills and the waste processing machinery. So yeah, and so we're really now at that point where we can start selling toilets at scale.
Yeah, wow.
In both of our target markets.
A long time. So that, you for a business like that, you've got to have those backers that are in it for the long game.
Yeah, and if you're running a hardware manufacturing company as well, I can't overestimate how much testing is important. And this was we did a lot of in-field testing and user testing, and that's been a big strength for us. But when it came to manufacturing readiness, what we found out when we got a new CTO is that we needed to basically do 10 times as much testing as we've been doing. And so now, and that's how you get to the point where you have the serious, robust, data-driven robustness. So that was a bit of a learning curve if anyone out there is running a manufacturing company.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so grant funding's got you a long way. And then you subsequently went on to find some angel investors to back you.
At the time that we pivoted from services to start thinking about selling hardware was when we also started seeking external angels. And prior to that, I think by virtue partly of the fact that the Gates Foundation and Innovate UK started funding us, that we got friends and family started to invest as well. But it was really much smaller numbers until we started going out to more angels. And that didn't really start until 2017.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Having I guess partly the kind of a validation and approval of those grant funding organizations, it does support you in terms of then going out to the professional angel.
Absolutely. And Innovate UK is a great example because they want co-investment.
Yeah. Okay, so where did you start in terms of finding those angel investors?
We initially started it's interesting because one of the angels who came in was somebody who my program officer in Innovate UK introduced me to, so there were virtuous cycle introductions like that came along, but we went to a broker as well at the beginning and put together a big pitch. And basically at that time, I think we said to ourselves, we really needed to go and get almost £1 million was what we wanted to get. What we actually got was 200,000. Okay,
so let's talk about that process.
So that was that didn't work out so well because then we were wow, we felt like we got a little bit shafted, to be honest, because we had paid upfront fees. It wasn't just a commission only model. It was we're going to pay you to help us build our business case. And I think they tried hard, and maybe it could have been a better collaboration, but whatever it was, I think it didn't deliver what we wanted it to deliver primarily. So we went through this whole process and we came out of the back of it having paid a lot of fees and raised about a quarter of what we needed.
It's a tricky one. It's a decision that lots of founders have to make. How do I reach those investors? Do I use an introducer or a broker? And I think that can depend on the type of business you have, the type of backers you need, where and the stage of evolution. But why did you make the decision to go with a broker at that time?
It's a good question. And it was quite a while ago, but I think that the main reason was that we were advised to. People sort of thought if you want to go and get a bigger financing, you just need to you need to open the door to this network. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I'm going to say, and that was not the last time we've worked with brokers, and we've had some very good introducer relationships. It depends so much on a number of different factors, but I think that it is a simple reality that networks, that a good introducer or broker will have access to a great network, and that is actually the biggest value that they're going to bring you.
What advice would you give to a founder thinking about that in terms of how to look for, if they're going to work with an introducer, what to look for, what to look out for?
Let's see, there's a lot of things. I think that I've seen fee structures that go anywhere from 3 to 6%, basically, which is like no win, no fee structure. And I think that that's standard. So I think it's nothing to be afraid of. If somebody says it's 5%, you shouldn't be like, oh, I mean, because it is sort of nauseating, the bigger the amount of money gets, to think about giving them that portion. But you just need to kind of understand that that's normal. I think that vetting introducers with other entrepreneurs is really important. So you need to find out who they've worked with, and you will find in some cases as well that they might mislead you about who they've worked with or what they actually did for other companies. So you go and check with the entrepreneurs what their experience was. The best reference you can get for a broker is going to be from someone else who's raised with them successfully. I think that you'll find that some brokers, you might get a gut feel from how they engage that they would be good to work with. Like, you might find that they have a really good systematized, light touch way of getting the information they need from you to take the business out and pitch it. And that for me is always a good sign that they understand how to do things efficiently. And I think that, there's a bit of a debate about fee structures, and like some people will I've heard people say more recently, sometimes when I've been talking to founders and stuff, that it's not a bad thing if a broker says they want to charge you a retainer, because it means they're going to really work harder. But I think that really depends a lot on your management team, and ultimately the better investment to make is in your management team being able to raise money and create a compelling business case for external parties. If I were an investor, I would want to see the planning and the ambition coming from the management team, and the pitch materials as well. Obviously any good person will give you feedback, but you should be able to get that from good angel investors too. And actually, on another note, if you raise from angels, and I think a lot of female founders do that a lot because it's harder for female founders to get money from institutional funders, you will find that some of them will be excellent sounding boards if they have an investment background, or have worked in VCs and things like that. Those can be some of your best sounding boards too.
And I really agree with you there, actually, Virginia. I think, in my view, investors want to hear from the founding team, and you guys need to own that, and you need to own your narrative and your story and be able to communicate that. I think there is a place for introducers in connecting you with those networks, because as hard as you might work and hustle to build your network, these introducers have been building those networks for years. So I think there is value there in the connections.
Yeah.
And as you say, those fees are pretty standard, 5%, 5% of investment that you wouldn't have got had they not introduced you, kind of makes sense. But I think at the end of the day,
it kind of does. Although sometimes I look at it from their perspective though, and I think it's an interesting gig,
I think what concerns me about a fee structure like that is that at the end of the day, introducers' relationships primarily with their network. and they get the fee for the deal being done. It's not tied into the quality of that deal, the longevity of that deal, the valuation, the terms, and so there's not a long-term play in that fee structure, which I find interesting.
Me too.
So I'm not personally a fan of that, particularly. I prefer it where there's a carry, so that there's a longer term play, maybe a fee plus carry. Anyway, that's my view. And there are some shady sharks out there that you have to look out for.
That's also true. Do you have any top tips for how to avoid the shady sharks?
I think gut feel is a big one. We need to trust our gut feel, and if you feel like there's a shady shark, you kind of know it, right? These people are out there kind of representing you and your business, so you have to be comfortable with that. But yeah, getting referrals also, as you say, a great way to do it. But in terms of preparing your business plan, the narrative, the financials, all of that stuff, I think that is a very different piece of work than the introduction piece.
Yeah, and if a broker wants to charge you to do that, then then maybe you raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, I think so. That's my view. All right, good. So anyway, you got lots more angel investment along that journey post growth grant funding.
Yeah.
And then, which is great. And then last year, 2020, in the year of the pandemic, you crowdfunded.
You know what? Yeah, you know what happened actually that I sort of forgot to mention before, but it's quite pertinent, is that in 2019 we decided to go out for a bigger financing. We thought we were going to go out for bigger financing. we have a very exciting business case, right? Because there's this huge global market, and we had landed a big customer in the Philippines, and it did, it was a time that we were able to justify saying we need to go and get a couple million and just raise, fund ourselves for 18 months and get through to the next stage. And by the way, this is standard advice that everybody will give you already, but raise 18 months of runway if you can.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's interesting because there's been a real trend towards doing smaller, more frequent raises.
I don't think it's a trend. I think it's a reality that female founders end up stuck with.
I think that's right. It is a very female founder thing because we don't ask for enough. And it runs through our fingers like water. It's crazy. I'm not sure if it's,
I wouldn't necessarily put it only on the female founders. I think that it's the type of finance that you're able to access is going to be more likely to be angel capital.
Yeah.
And so you're going to need to, this will start to change. I think maybe it's already starting to change, but the big irony of our story that year was that we came across a VC that was supposedly investing in female founded tech companies and is supposedly trying to buck the trend and make a difference, and turned out to, they misled us about when their fund was closing and if their fund was closing in a pretty intense way, to the point where where it put us into a very precarious position. And then that was right when the pandemic started.
That's really frustrating.
It was a bad situation, and we had a term sheet for 2 million.
Yeah, and there are still not enough funds that are focusing in this space, and there's not that much money that is specifically allocated to female founders. So you've got to be chasing the rest of the
and you need to. Most of the funds that I've come across are still raising their funds.
Yeah, and they're small funds; they're not big.
And they'll be saying, they'll be wanting to build pipeline of interesting investments to pitch to their LPs. And so they'll take time to, talk with you and lead you into their world. And some of them will be very transparent about where they are in their process. And some of them will be so transparent to the point where they won't even, they might even consider it unethical to even try to take any of your time at all. But then you can understand why they want to engage with the market and entrepreneurs, but it's just something to watch out for. Like, if you're talking to any kind of VC that hasn't closed their fund yet, they might never close it. And that's a reality. And I think it's hard to raise a VC fund, so.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there's a lot of VCs that will take meetings with entrepreneurs to learn more about their market, to understand more about it, to check, to understand the space without any intention of investing. There's a lot of being led down the garden path, which
There is that too,
need to
yeah.
look out for. It's a minefield. So you didn't
Yeah,
go
the best advice I would give in hindsight, which is also with benefit of hindsight, is generate as much revenue as you can, so you don't have to depend too much on equity. I mean, that's where we're looking now. As we look ahead, now that we're starting to sell, we're thinking, we can generate revenues and profits, and that might really change the dynamic of our fundraising requirement. And at the same time, it makes it easier to raise money the more you sell.
I mean, it's the holy grail. It puts you in a better position of power in your negotiations, if and when you decide you need investment or not.
Yeah, and if you're developing technology, it can be difficult because there is a transition point when it's like when it's before it's ready and after it's ready. But you kind of need to start thinking, well, how can we bring this to market and start monetizing it as quickly as we can?
So the crowdfund, was that then a reaction against
we were in a dire situation at the start of the pandemic. We faced a massive cliff. We had to tell all of our shareholders that this VC that we'd had to walk away from it. And we really needed the £2 million that we had said we were going to raise with this, so we had to start again. And we raised money that year from angels, and then we did a crowdfunding campaign, and we raised 1.3 million instead of the 2. And so obviously we also cut costs and revisited our plan, and it was a lot of adapting.
And how did you find the whole experience of crowdfunding?
Interesting. Thankfully, I had a marketing consultant support the process, which was a godsend, and she was so helpful. And it was just really made a difference to have someone. You have to have somebody in your management team, on your board, or marketing person. A marketing person is a good fit actually for crowdfunding, but you just need it. Once you get the campaign live, there's going to be several weeks of constant kind of activity. So you just need to be prepared for that, and don't think you can take it on by yourself. Now that I look at we have this, this shareholder now, which consists of 800 people. Wow. On our cap table. And there's something really moving about that. There's something quite like it kind of makes you feel, in a way, an increased sense of responsibility, which might sound strange because, of course we're equally responsible to all of our shareholders, but the crowd is a different dynamic. So it gives you a different mindset. And when you see, as a founder, when you see individual people, this growing list of individual people investing in your business, there's something that makes you feel quite moved. Yeah. And in a way, quite overwhelmed.
I mean, I always say, imagine those 800 people all standing in front of you and thinking every single one of them believes that this is going to be a globally successful business.
I know it's empowering and scary at the same time.
Yeah.
And as a founder, your real job is to go out and run the business and make it grow. And so I think, I'm glad that we did it. I wouldn't say it's a bad idea to crowdfund. I mean, the complaint that you'll find with most founders is that it's a costly way to raise money, because you have these fees, and then you have there's additional marketing fees. I mean, the way that, and you're also dealing with a rather generic entity, which is organizing it, and they have their standard ways of doing things. So there's a bureaucratic element to it. And you also will most likely need to make small adjustments to your company documents, which is not to be, depending on your stage and how many shareholders you have, it's not to be underestimated. That's a piece of work that needs to be done as well, and that makes the first close take longer. So, it was a bit of a mixed bag, I'd say. But what was exciting about it, I think what could be more exciting about it looking ahead, now that we've just launched the UK Zen toilet, we have this opportunity to go to the crowd again, and bring new updates. And so there's something exciting about that. And if you have a business to consumer company, there's a lot of ways that crowdfunding can complement your objectives, not only by raising money, but also through marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. What about your valuation journey throughout these different raises? What's that been like for you?
It's been interesting. One of the things that was interesting was that at the beginning, we had a valuation that was just set, like when we closed the first batch of equity. I think that this also had to do with my bullish co-founders. They just picked a number out and said it's going to be $1 million. We'd only just started. We had this product that can change the world.
Yeah.
But that in a way that turned out to be immaterial, because in a sense, by the time we started raising more equity, like 5 or 6 years had gone by, a lot of things had changed. So it didn't matter in a way. But I guess one of the things that I learned from that at the very start was that in some ways valuation is a game. And we've done a lot of different approaches over the years to looking at valuation, and it really is beneficial to learn about the sort of mathematical ways, and to learn about the valuation science, but it's more art than science. But to learn what the science is useful for you as a founder, and then the art element is something that I think is also worthy of consideration.
I mean, it's a long-term calculation, isn't it? Looking at the trade-offs between, equity and valuation as you move through the fundraising journey, because at each stage you're selling a little bit more. How much control do you want? Where do you see it ending up? What's the end game in terms of exit valuation? It is complex, and as you say, you can't just do it with the calculator. Because it's looking at the context of the market, the competitors.
I've read a lot about, obviously we've all read the articles about what the small percentage of funding from VCs is to female founded businesses, but I'd be quite curious to know how gender impacts founders' approaches to valuing their companies.
It's hugely different, and it depends at what stage. But the further on you get from a kind of pre-seed to seed to Series A, the worse the situation is.
Oh dear.
It's really bad.
Not good news.
No, it's not good news. The valuations are around half as good for female founders as they are for men. Not joking. So that's part of the kind of raise more value.
I have a question for you about this.
Can
I ask a question about this? Because when you look at that situation, you think, well, why am I doing this? Sometimes for me, I have this mixed reaction to the female founder stuff, because I'm really happy that it's very good that there's this growing trend of recognizing what's going on, and that, I think there is sort of change on the horizon. And then at the same time, like many situations with social inequality, it feels like there's such a long way to go, that it sometimes makes you think, it just sometimes makes you feel a little bit like depressed.
That's the thing. I mean, the thing is,
how do you get away from that?
The last thing we want is for this to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, as all us female founders go,
exactly,
I can't be bothered with this, I'm just going to build this business by myself. That's the last thing we want. So I think it's a complex issue, Virginia. Yes, it's a sort of a systemic issue from an industry that has been built for men by men for many, many years, but there's a lot of issues to do with, how female founders are, and our conditioning around risk, around confidence, around making sure that we are empowered with the skills that help us understand how to play this game. Because as you say, there's a lot of gameplay here, and it's complex. So we have to look at it from both sides. And all we can do as female founders is play our part and educate ourselves and get the support we need up there and smash it in actually what is a very male-dominated arena. Well, there's bashing that needs to go on the other side, which is getting the investment community to sit up and take notice of the power of female founders and look at their decision-making process to try and remove as much bias as possible. But that's going to take a long time.
Well, it's good. It's great that it's happening. And I guess at the end of the day, if you've founded a business, there's so much going on. that will motivate you to keep going, that it becomes just part of a big cauldron of
but we have to not be depressed. We have to kind of go, yeah, never mind about all those stats, I'm going to go out there and smash this.
You just have to keep on
but
going.
You know what, just to kind of finish up, really, I mean, did you feel that bias yourself as a solo female founder? Have you felt it on this journey?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think I've battled a lot with that. In fact, I think interesting, like, I mean, on a personal level as well, which we don't need to go into all the details, but I think that in the last kind of 5 years, especially, and somehow my own personal development and the business's development and my development of my role within the business have all kind of changed and evolved quite a lot. And I guess, I've always been somebody who sort of projects confidence and seems to be confident. I think that's what people have always told me, but really having that at a deeper level is something that takes time to develop. And also just kind of grounding yourself in the reality. I think when you have set up what is quite a visionary company, one of the most exciting things is when the vision starts to become tangible. And, in our case, it's quite visceral because people use our toilets. So it's quite a very tangible thing. And so there's something like so exciting and rewarding about that. And then at the same time, you're like, it's starting, you start looking at the numbers and you start looking at where we are now and what's the reality today and what do we need the reality to be tomorrow. And yeah, it does takes an enormous amount of strength to keep developing as you keep dealing with that evolution. Yeah. And so I guess there's a growth opportunity in that, which I guess is worth noticing. And also, as a woman, you go through these transitions in your adulthood, starting a family and all that kind of stuff has all happened for me at the same time. And it's kind of there are synergies in terms of how you take command of your life and control of your life and your business.
Yeah. And it is I think it is often a different experience as a female founder, especially when you're having a family and dealing with those challenges.
Yeah. We signed our first big grant agreement with the Gates Foundation, like the same week my son was born.
Oh my God. How the hell did you do that?
I don't know.
Yeah, but you know what? If you want a job doing, ask a woman, she'll get it done. So what's next for you guys in terms of, I guess on both levels, from a funding perspective, are you going to be raising more money? And where's the business heading next?
Well, it's all about the big focus right now is sales. We're closing a bridge right now, and we are planning another financing for next year. The exact timing and quantum we might revisit a little bit but we have we want to do that financing just to scale up our manufacturing capacity and increase our gross margins. We have a very clear and very tangible plan for that, which is a big difference from where the business was, a number of years ago. So yeah, there's more fundraising, but there's also just a really sharp focus on selling. So we've got this really exciting opportunities in international markets right now. And we've also just launched the Zen, and there's just been so much interest. So we're really building pipeline for that and hoping to get a lot more toilets in service in the UK and also in overseas ecotourism applications in the next year. Because it's, as of the last few years, there's been a small number of Loowatt toilets. You might or might not know, but there's Loowatt toilets have been out, all last summer. There's a fleet which is owned by a servicing partner that we have, which has been out there. But now there's the opportunity to really grow our presence. So that's exciting.
Yeah, awesome. And we get back into real life and getting out there, and we need
there's demand. There's demand.
Look, everybody needs toilets, right? This is a great business.
Everybody needs a good happy toilet experience.
Yeah. Well, I hope you crowdfund again. I will look forward to putting some more money into your next campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Really, really interesting. And we look forward to watching your continued growth and I'd like to say happy flushing, but I don't even know if your toilets
Our
flush.
toilets, we call it a waterless flush.
There we go.
And thank you so much. I think it's so important, the work that you're doing. So I appreciate it a lot. It was an honor to be here.
Great. Well, you will be inspiring many female founders who are listening to this. So thank you. And we will speak to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.